Today's lecture will be focusing on the second two chapters in the text about police, looking at the organization, uses of discretion, police subculture. Police organizations are typically run on a split or sort of combined system of a military model with a bureaucracy. They're both very regimented. They have clear levels of accountability, communication, and are set up so that people know what their position is, what their job is, who they're accountable to, who they're responsible for. It's not necessarily the most efficient model. Anyone that's had to deal with a large-scale bureaucracy in the past, maybe even here at Georgia State, in terms of having your voice heard, it can be very difficult. But it is the most efficient way that we've devised to operate large organizations like this. The different jobs, different tasks within police operations, division of labor. Division of labor was what I was trying to think of in the last lecture and could not put those words together. We're looking here at the police division of labor. As departments grow in size, or when they're created, depending of a particular size, they expand the need for more division of labor, more individuals assigned to specific tasks. Some of those tasks within a police department are officers assigned to patrol, just having a presence in the community, monitoring for things, being ready to respond to calls that are in the area of where they're operating. Officers that handle traffic control. It's a very important aspect of police operations. If police don't properly maintain traffic patterns, well, most of you have driven on Atlanta streets and are aware of the free-for-all nature of Atlanta drivers. So if the police were not there to monitor some of the more congested, sensitive areas of the city, people might starve to death in their cars before they were able to turn left in particular environments. Officers that do criminal investigative work, detectives, typically only about 15% of officers ever join a detective force. It's a kind of an offshoot of the typical bureaucratic ladder. There's officers that work vice squads, specializing in drug-related offenses, gambling-related offenses, prostitution-related offenses on different levels, street-level prostitution, human trafficking. There's a lot of different types of those offenses. If the city has an issue with organized crime, sometimes they will have organized crime units. Again, just as the needs grow, same thing with the juvenile services. If they encounter a lot of juvenile offenders, they'll develop a juvenile program. A department that is, or an aspect of policing that is often undervalued and underfunded is community policing. Having outreach with the community, opening dialogues, having easier lines of communication to address situations, to prevent situations from reaching a boiling point. Having people to reach out, having people that the police can reach out to in the community that the community sees as legitimate, as authentic community members, to try to guide the police force and the community through some of these more sensitive times, to avoid things like violent riots, to avoid things like arson from taking place, to try to not gloss over negative events when they take place, but just have the resources in place so that these things can be handled in a constructive manner. And then a type of policing that has been probably too heavily invested in is special operations, SWAT teams, and the continued militarization of the police force in the effort to fight the losing war on drugs. But that's another aspect of policing, another division of labor that a lot of departments have created to suit what is seemingly their need for those types of activities. But that's a situation that probably should be addressed in a different manner. Some other aspects of running the large bureaucratic organization, having officers or sometimes civilian employees that handle personnel issues, making sure people have access to the benefits, filling out paperwork for those effects, handling the pension funds, union connections, also officers in the training academies, people in planning, budget analysis, where you're having to look at what you want to do as a department and then contextualize that within what you are able to do based on your financial restraints. So it's very important that there's a lot of coordination and a lot of efficient use of limited resources. You also have legal assistance for the department, for the individual officers, depending on what the situations are, what situations might come up. You might have officers and their department be on opposite sides of a situation where they're both being sued from a particular individual for whatever reason. You also have officers in public information that are going to speak to the media. That's very important to have a consistent voice for when you have to communicate with the citizens through the media. And then, again, larger departments that have a need for it will develop internal affairs units to handle issues of police misconduct. Typically try to keep those separate from the normal rank and file officers of bureaucratic structure, because they don't want to have pre-existing loyalties. That's the point of having a separate internal investigations unit. Some other things, other jobs that are in larger departments: records units, communications, dispatch, working with 911 services, telling officers where to go. With the records room, you have property room where you're collecting evidence, storing that until it goes to trial. Some larger departments have labs for running their own lab tests on forensic evidence that's collected. Also, alcohol testing spaces. In Atlanta, those facilities are in the jail. Some departments have them at the police stations. It just depends on the area. Detention is an issue too, maintaining jails in those facilities. Some larger cities have their own Department of Corrections. Some places it's the Sheriff's Department that runs it. Some places it's the city. It depends on what system is developed in that particular area. In Atlanta, the Atlanta police run the jail and the city jail, but then the county jail that's in the city, Rice Street Jail, is run by the Sheriff's Department. And you also have the people that monitor the equipment, motor pool as well, maintaining the cars, maintaining the other equipment, making sure that supplies are there for that. Is very important for the operations of the department. Police research, as we talked about before, criminal justice research in general is difficult to conduct. Research on police in the field is one of the more difficult aspects of it, because the job of policing is so unique. It's oftentimes hard to adhere to experimental conditions. But a couple that have had some long-lasting results, sort of for different reasons, are listed here. So the first is the Kansas City experiment. Basically, in this study, they broke up the city into three areas of the city into one of three categories. They were either going to receive double the patrol they'd had in the past, they were going to receive the same patrol they'd had in the past, or they were going to receive a reduction in patrol. To see if increased patrol or decreased patrol had an effect on crime, basically, whether it would go up with reduction in patrol or down with a increase in patrol. Overall, as it relates to the crime rate, it had no effect. The double patrol didn't matter. The reduction in patrol didn't matter. The crime rate really didn't change. What they did find, though, was that the people in the neighborhoods liked it better when there was more police presence. It made them feel safer, and even though it didn't reduce crime directly, something like that, making people feel safer, increasing the social cohesion with a neighborhood, can be beneficial. That individual might be more likely to call the police if they see something happening. They might be more likely to report a crime or give information they have about a crime than they might in a different neighborhood with um, a, a more negative relationship with the police. So while it didn't have a measurable effect with what it sought out, it did have the sort of unexpected um, caveat that was brought into the uh, greater knowledge pool for criminal justice research. Another type of experiment that was completely bastardized in the way that it was incorporated in practice is broken windows theory. And you may have heard the term broken windows theory or broken windows policing thrown around a lot, with a lot of the mentions of police brutality and excessive force and militaristic tactics by police. Um, broken windows policing and broken windows theory are not the same thing. Broken windows policing was formulated through some of the ideas of broken windows theory, but broken windows theory didn't call for or prescribe the activities that broken windows policing became. So broken windows theory is basically saying that disorder breeds disorder. So if you're in a neighborhood where you see a lot of broken windows, abandoned cars, things like that, it sends the message that people don't give a shit about that neighborhood. Okay, nobody's fixing things that are broken. Nobody's calling in these cars to get towed, and if they are, nobody's doing anything about it. So by reducing that type of urban blight, you can increase the perception and the attachment that people have to these neighborhoods. And the way that they conducted this experiment was they took two very similar cars and they parked one in the Bronx, and this is in late 1970s or 1980s. They parked one in the Bronx in New York and they parked one in Long Beach in California. The car in the Bronx got stripped like you'd see in like a cartoon or in a movie. Like you turn around and then the car's up on cinder blocks. Um, the car in Long Beach sat there for a week and nothing happened. The car just sat there. Nobody touched it. So they went and they smashed one of the windows on the car, and then by the next day it was completely stripped. So the environmental cues were interpreted that by that window being smashed, it was fair game, and the people in the environment took apart the car. What happened is that policymakers misinterpreted those results to just say that we should police all types of crime, all types of criminality, all types of disorder. Not that we should try to maintain our spaces and give people stock in the environment, but that we're just going to punish our way out of the situation. And so that's what happened. Broken windows policing became zero tolerance policing and has contributed in a lot of places, particularly in New York City, with a very negative relationship between the police and the citizens that they're policing. So it's important to note the difference between broken windows theory and broken windows policing, and they are not the same thing. Broken windows policing is basically the Frankenstein's monster that came from broken windows theory. The police subculture, the sort of the blue wall that you may have heard, stems from the professional era of policing when we pulled them out of the street into the cars. You started to see a lot of police only socializing with other police, to hang out with other police. Part of that is they don't, think that other people understand them. There's not many jobs that have a similar ask of their performer to do the things that you do in policing. So that coupled with the inherent danger, the risk, the excitement, sometimes the boredom, the sort of hurry up and wait mentality for waiting for things to happen, um, it, it bonds them socially, much like you would at any other job. It's more intense because of the nature of the job that they're doing. So that That coupled with the lack of community connections during that time created this sort of blue wall that has become a problem um, in recent times with regards to trying to investigate police misconduct and things like that. So that's something that we sort of have to sort of readdress and look at some of the positives of it, but many of the negatives that are also outweighing some of the positives, and figure out a way to kind of address the connection that the police have with the community that they work in, that they live in, going forward. Another obstacle to that is police cynicism, which takes two forms. One is that it's what's called selective contact. So most of the people that the police encounter on a daily basis are agitated or pissed off or intoxicated or complaining because they got pulled over for driving 30 miles an hour over the speed limit. So they encounter a lot of people that result in negative social interactions. So after a while, they start to just think that all people are going to have a negative reaction to them. It's not valid, but it is something that you can sort of understand. Think about any kind of job that you had, and you start to sort of prejudge or categorize your customers as you see them. The other type is that they see people that they arrested go in, come out, and commit new crimes. They see the system not working. They see the wrong people being promoted. They see the wrong people being elected mayor, and having a negative impact on their profession. And they sort of get jaded towards the system. So they have this selective encounters with the public, and this jading of the system and their opinions. And it can result in some really negative perceptions and negative mindsets for police officers. Couple that with the stress of the job, and it makes for a very difficult work environment. So their stress from just the outside world, the normal stress that everybody else faces. If you've ever been late to work and you get stuck in traffic and you get cut off, and then you're in a kind of an asshole mood the whole rest of the day. That happens to police too. It's just that the outcomes and interactions, if somebody's lippy at a drive-through or at a food place versus the police, it has a more negative outcome. But the police face those external stressors just like everybody else. They also have stressors within the organization, just like anybody else does within their job. Are they going to get promoted? Are they going to get the overtime that they need? Are they going to have to work the detail they don't want to do? Is their partner an asshole? Is their boss an asshole? Are they an asshole? Part of where's their place in the organization? Also, the job is stressful. So the job, again, encountering people that are often altered or intoxicated, having to take the blame as an officer in one jurisdiction for something that happens in another jurisdiction. It's a very difficult job that the officers are oftentimes undertrained for, underpaid for. So again, just very stressful job in an already stressful environment. And then personal stresses, things that happen in people's life. People get divorced. People's kids put gum in other kids' hair at school. All kinds of things happen. And again, it's just sort of compounding. The effects of this show officers having much higher rates of stress-induced medical conditions, high blood pressure, heart attacks, also emotional conditions, which they're oftentimes maladjusted to deal with, reluctant to seek out psychological counseling because of the blue wall mentality. It's not seen as socially acceptable in police forces, much the same way that some ethnic and cultural groups are facing the same issues too, and having this sort of systematic resistance to psychoanalysis and mental health treatment. Eventually, this does start to have an effect on work performance. It would happen to anyone, and it's something that departments have to look out for. Officers sort of burning out, or getting in situations where they might make bad decisions, might make criminal decisions. So it's something that they have to evaluate and try to prevent from reaching a sort of crescendo where really, really bad things happen. Okay, so make sure to watch the videos that are linked on this week's to-do list, as they will really contextualize, along with the video that I posted last week. They'll really contextualize a lot of the things about modern policing, some of the issues that they're facing, it, some of the more hot button issues, and what we're trying to do to address those, and what things that we're honestly doing a really shitty job of doing, because the militarization video that I link on there was made 6 years ago, and not much has effectively changed since then. So again, just contextualize this with everything that we've learned and everything that's in the text.